Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, and welcome to the Karey Carbaugh podcast, episode number 47. Buenas noches, damas y caballeros, chicos y chicas, niños de todas edades, y bienvenidos a el Karey Carbaugh podcast, episodio número 47. I always have to double check the numbers every week. These podcast numbers just keep creeping up, these episode numbers. Welcome in tonight. My name is Karey Carbaugh, and this is the Karey Carbaugh Podcast. And I've titled tonight's episode, Born to Win, Programmed to Lose. And I'll get into that in a moment. No, you didn't forget to turn your clocks back or turn them ahead. I know I'm an hour late. Sorry about that. I wasn't sure how long the choir rehearsals were going to go. I started rehearsals tonight for a church choir for Christmas. And so I may have to bump this podcast an hour later. Either that or move it back to Tuesday nights because my Tuesday night commitment through the holidays has stopped. So I could bump it back to the same time, the 8 o'clock Mountain Time on Tuesday nights, or bump it to 9 o'clock on Wednesday nights. Let me know in the comments if you have a preference, if one of those would work better than the other. I know some of you on the East Coast, this makes it a little bit late. You can always catch these on the replay, but I always like to have as many people live as possible. So if you have a preference, I'll mention this at the end in case some people join us during the middle. If you have a preference, whether we keep this little bit later time frame through the holidays or bump it to Tuesday night, let me know that. I could also potentially bump it to Thursday, though that won't, well, yeah, it might work next week for Thanksgiving. We may play around with this a little through the holidays and see what works, because I may need to move it anyway after the holidays. I've got a couple things in the works that I'll explain more about if they come to fruition, starting in the new year. But welcome in tonight. Let me know where you're dialing in from, and if you're catching this on the live or the replay. It's always nice to know where people are dialing in from. This podcast is reaching a whole lot of places in the world that I never thought we'd reach. Places like Zambia, Mexico. I've had a friend that's watched this a couple times from the Netherlands in Europe. Yeah, it's fun for me to see where you're dialing in from. So let me know that in the comments. And as a friend of mine or a guy that I follow on YouTube, he's not really a friend because I don't know him in person, but as he likes to say, smash that like button, like if you do. Leave me a comment down below if any of this is resonating with you, if you're getting value. Let me know that as we go through this. And let's jump into tonight's topic. This is one that we've covered kind of before. I had to look back and see if I'd ever used this title before, although I may start repeating some titles and just approach them from a slightly different angle. We've covered some of this in the past, but I wanted to take a little different look at this. This is an expression that I've heard a lot in some of the personal growth, personal development seminars that I've taken. And I think it really applies to self-esteem and hopefully will help you to look at your own life, where you're at in your journey, and maybe this will help with some self-esteem issues if you're struggling. Hopefully it will. But this idea of born to win and programmed to lose. We may cover this a few different times over the holidays because I've got a few different ideas on things that might be relevant over the holidays here. So we may revisit this a time or two. But what do I mean by that? Let's think for a moment, if you will. If you want to close your eyes and ponder this, feel free to do so. But think back to when you were a child. Maybe 2 or 3 years old, maybe 1 or 2 years old. Let's start there. You probably can't remember that far back, but maybe you've got children or grandchildren. Think back to when they were 1 or 2 years old and learning to crawl or learning to walk. I would doubt that those children looked up and said, I can't do this. I can't walk. What are you talking about? I'm just going to sit here, because if I walk, I might fall. Likely not. Or crawl. I can't crawl. What if my legs give out from under me and I fall down on my belly? Most children don't look up and say that, even if they could talk. They get up on their hands and legs and start to crawl, usually with a lot of enthusiasm. I know that the kids that I've watched learning to walk and crawl, let's start with crawling first. They've got enthusiasm. They're excited about it. And if they fall, they get back up again. If they're learning to crawl and their legs slip out from under them and they fall down on their belly, they get back up and try it again. And sometimes they might get frustrated if it happens multiple times, and maybe they give up for the time being, but then the next day they're ready to do it again. Or an hour or two later, they're ready to do it again. And the same with walking. If you get a kid who's just barely learning to walk, and maybe their parent or grandparent, if you're a parent or grandparent, maybe you reach your hand out to help them with the first step or two. But if they fall, they don't look at you and say, nah, I'm done with this. Enough's enough. I've had enough of this. Again, maybe if they fall a few times, maybe they give up for the day. Maybe they're tired and we've had enough for the day. Just like if you're practicing a new skill. You don't do it 24/7 until you learn it. You do it for a while and then okay, we'll try again tomorrow. But a child doesn't look at you the next day when you say, okay, let's walk again. Come on, take a step. You're encouraging them. They don't look at you and say, no, I fell yesterday. I'm done with this. No, they get back up and they do it again. And usually with excitement. They're usually really excited about it. And then take that a little step further. As they're learning to talk, they don't quit talking just because it didn't work the first time. They tried to say daddy and it came out dada. They don't quit. They keep trying again until they get a little bit closer, a little bit closer. And as they're learning language, their minds are like a sponge. They're programmed to win. They're programmed to learn. I'm sorry, they're born to win. They're born to learn. That's their natural instinct, is to learn more. And kids are exploring the world around them, and they're excited, and they want to learn more. Tell me more. Tell me why. Tell me how. And then as they get a little bit older, maybe they start going to school. And you usually don't hear a kindergartner saying, I hate school. No, kindergartners are usually excited to go to school because they're going to learn stuff. They're going to learn how to read a little bit in kindergarten, or maybe they're going to learn how to write their name, although some kids know that already before they get to kindergarten. But they're excited. They're like a sponge, and they're learning. They're programmed to win. They expect to win. They expect to learn more. They expect to achieve more. And, through most of early elementary school anyway, kids go out for a sport and they expect to win. They expect to get the trophy or get the medal or learn how to play the sport well. They're excited about it. And then somewhere along the way, that changes. Whether it's late elementary school, or probably starts, I'm guessing, in late elementary school. Maybe their peer tells them, you're not very good at that sport. You're not very good at running. Up until that point, the kid has just loved to run. Maybe it's their favorite thing. And now a kid at school says, hey, you're not that fast. I'm faster than you are. That's where the programming starts. The programming to lose. Born to win. They're born to win. They're born to soak up that knowledge and that talent and that skill. And now people around them, usually starts with their peers, tell them, nah, you're not really that good. And so they start to think, well, maybe I'm not a good runner. Maybe I'm not good at sports. Or think back, I know as I've shared on podcasts before, I'm a person with a vision disability. When I was 5 or 6 years old, like every other 5 or 6 year old, I thought I'd be a fireman someday or a policeman someday. I never thought about the fact that I couldn't drive and that might not be an achievable goal. When I was in kindergarten, first, second grade, like every other kid, I'm going to be a policeman or a fireman or a race car driver. I'm trying to think of some of the other common things that kids want to be when they grow up. And it wasn't until somewhere along the way that I realized, I can't drive, probably can't be a fireman, probably can't be a policeman. And so then that programming begins. And some of it, yes, is because of natural skill. And in my case, a disability that impedes that. But in some cases, it might simply be the people around you tell you, you can't be a professional athlete. You're not even that good at running. How are you going to play football? How are you going to whatever? A kid, kindergarten, first, second, third grade through elementary school might dream of being a professional athlete. And now they get to middle school. We used to call it junior high school. And suddenly they're told, no, you're not very good. Not only are you not going to be a professional football player, but you're not even going to make the team in middle school. And so the kid starts to doubt himself or herself. And they start to think, maybe I'm not that good. And as that programming continues, myself as a former computer programmer, these instructions that we put into the computer as a programmer, or in this case, the instructions that we put into a child as they grow up, maybe they can't. We as a society, or we as peers, sometimes without even thinking, start to plant these seeds. And then as the child grows into adolescence, and they start to discover that maybe they're not as good as they thought they were, and their dreams start to wane a little bit. And the people around them feed into this idea, no, you're not really all that good. You're not the top athlete in the world. And obviously everybody can't be the top athlete, but that starts to feed into other things. And maybe the kid starts to think, maybe I'm not all that good. Or I think back to when I was working with a group of adolescents, and we had a young man in the group. He was about 13, I think, when he joined this group. And his mom, part of what we did was a form of public speaking, where we had to get up, the kids had to get up and give short little speeches in front of a small group of their peers. And his mother warned me. She said, he'll never do it. You just need to know this up front. He will not get up and speak in front of the class, or in front of the group of peers in this case. And I said, really? Why not? And she told me that he had a teacher in, I think it was second or third grade, when he got up and stuttered a little bit and stammered around with his little speech that he was giving in front of his class. The teacher scolded him and told him he was not a good public speaker, that he should not try to public speak. And so he took that to heart. And from third grade till about, he was probably in maybe seventh grade when I came to know him, he would not speak publicly. And he was programmed. Before second grade, he loved to get up and talk. But he was programmed. That one incident reprogrammed his brain to think that maybe I'm not a good public speaker. And it took probably a year or more of encouragement and getting him to just get up in front of me or one or two adults and not even stand up. Maybe at first it was just sitting down talking like I'm doing right now here. And we would get him to recite the speech or the talk. These were things that they had to memorize. And so we'd get him to memorize. He didn't have any problem memorizing. It was just the reciting he wasn't comfortable with. And so we worked with him, myself and another adult that was working with the group, worked with him one-on-one for a long time to reprogram that thought, that programming to lose. And finally, it's been a while, but I think it was probably a year or so that it took us. We finally got him to stand up in front of his peers and come out of his shell. It was never something he was excited about and loved, but we at least got him to where he could do it. And before, he had been programmed to lose when it came to public speaking. He was born to win, and he was excited about it as a kid. And that one incident reprogrammed his brain to say, maybe I'm not that good at public speaking. And it took a lot of reprogramming to get him back to feeling comfortable speaking in public again. And that's an example I hadn't even thought about before starting this podcast, but it just occurred to me. And that's a real good example, I think, of how we don't realize the impact we have on other people when we say something negative to them. That is, in effect, programming them to lose. Same way with ourselves. When someone says something negative to us, it starts that programming to lose. Once again, born to win, programmed to lose. And I think that really ties in well with this theme that I've tried to have with a lot of these of self-esteem. Because none of us wants to be a loser. None of us wants to be in a position where we can't do something. Obviously, we can't do everything. We all have skills and talents. But in general, this idea of accomplishing goals and winning in general, if the programming starts too young and goes too deep, it can spread well beyond just the simple example that I gave of public speaking. If this young man had continued down that path, he might have started to doubt himself in many other aspects of life, and then gotten to be an adult and really thought negatively and had a low self-esteem of himself because he continued that programming to lose. And so we can reprogram to win, but society as a whole tends to put this seed of doubt in all of us. I don't think it's an intentional thing, but as peers, we're competitive. We all are. And we unfortunately try to win at someone else's expense, oftentimes. And that feeds into this programming to lose idea. And so without belaboring this point, I think you get the idea. This is something to think about this week. If you've got any thoughts, drop them in the comments. If you've got some things that maybe you were originally born to win and now have become programmed to lose. If that's something we as a community can help you work through, let us know. If you just would like to share that with us, maybe you've worked through it and reprogrammed yourself. That would be interesting to know as well. Hopefully you've gotten value from this. If you have, leave me a comment with the word value. Once again, like if you do, smash that like button. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you've gotten value. Let me know if you're catching this live or on the replay and where you're calling in from, dialing in from. And if you'd like to be added to my email list, which I'm starting to build so that I can do some more personal events, more private events, perhaps some of this reprogramming, if that's something that resonates with folks, I'll see what the comments say. That could be some of our private, more in-depth conversation. But if you'd like to be added to my email list, leave me the word email in the comments and I'll reach out to you to get your email address privately. Or you can direct message me with your email address so that you don't have to share it publicly. And we will hopefully start to get some of those events together in the near future. And with that, I think we've gone as far as we need to with this topic. I may revisit it from some different angles. I've got some different ideas through the holidays. But give some thought this week, if this resonated with you, to what's something you were excited about as a kid that maybe you're not excited about now. And maybe that's some of the reprogramming that's happened in your life. So with that, I will say a fond farewell and good evening or good day, depending on when you're watching this. Until we meet again, make it a blessed week for those around you. Make it a blessed day for yourself. And do something positive, especially as we start to enter the holidays. Do something positive for someone around you to be a blessing and bless them. With that, have a great evening and we will talk soon. Bye-bye for now.